Hey everyone, I made my first tutorial yesterday and I actually got some really positive feedback from that, so I thought I would make another tutorial today, and today we are going to discuss bees. Bees are actually one of my favorite systems in Frackin Universe. It's a really deep, complex system that rewards understanding, rewards investment, and rewards exploration. Bees are essentially a capturable creature that you then use to generate more resources. And there's something like 24 different bee types. But we're going to focus on kind of a very basic introduction, and we'll get a little bit more advanced towards the end of the video. So to start with, how do you capture a bee? I've got my game really zoomed in, and I set up a small area here that we'll be able to do a little bit of showcasing. And I've already basically kind of got things started, but there's a bee in the air. So how do I capture it? You're going to need to get a insect net, which you can make at the agricultural table, and you just hit it, and boom, I got a honey drone. So what you do with the honey drone is first you need to, well, here, let's look at it. It's going to show up here. This is the honey drone I just caught. So notice there are a whole bunch of question marks. It says, you know, the top says honey drone with an unknown subtype. Then it's got 8 lines. Base production, question mark. Drone toughness, question mark. Drone breed rate, question mark. Similarly for queen breed rate, queen lifespan, mutation chance, mite resistance, and work time. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to our microscope. So that's one thing you need. You need a microscope in order to identify any of your bees. And this will fill up this status. When it gets to 100%, we're going to actually be able to see what the bee does. And we'll talk through all of that as well. So we've got a base production of 1, drone toughness of 10, drone breed rate of 5, queen breed rate of 1, queen lifespan of 1,000, mutation chance of 0.15, mite resistance of 2, and work time of day. And then you'll see on the bottom there's this big long string, and that is the genome. And the genome isn't particularly, as far as I've found, it doesn't tell you anything just by looking at it, but each bee will have its own unique genome that dictates its stats. So, when you've caught a bee and you've identified it, not only do you need a drone, but you'll also need a queen. And I went and I already caught some bees. And what you do then is, after you have a drone and a queen, you will need to go to your bee station, which you make at the basic Frackin Universe station. I believe it's it is the machining table. You're going to be able to make a bee station. So the bee station has everything you can make for bees. This is where you're going to make your microscope, and it's also where you're going to make apiaries. You start out only being able to make regular-sized apiaries, but as you progress in capturing bees, you will get the golden wood and beeswax you need to make large apiaries. So what does an apiary look like? And how do you set that up? Let's look at the one I've got. The apiary I have, it is set up as a crafting station. And I can take these out so you can see a little bit better. This first input is your queen. You'll notice it's facing to the right because all queens face to the right. The second one is for your drones, and that's facing to the left because all drones face to the left. The third one is for your frame, and the frame is another item that you can make at the bee crafting station that you place in your apiary, and that can modify the production of your bees in different ways. We'll talk about that in just a second. So I just want to set mine back up. So your queen and your drone get placed in here, and you'll notice my drones are increasing. That means that the queen is breeding drones, and you will occasionally see, yep, like the honey just went up by 1, so my drones are out, or my bees are outputting. Now that it is nighttime, however, remember the work time here is day. Now that it's nighttime, the bees are no longer active. So this is an opportunity for us to go back here and talk about frames. There are a bunch of frames, and frankly, I typically do not make many different types of frames. I have found that while they are great for variety, they are not super necessary. So you start out with basic frames, and they do nothing. Eventually, you're going to be able to make something like a copper frame, and notice that the copper frame, it functions just like a basic frame, but it also gives some additional stats to your bees. So this is a great way to just sort of improve your bees without having to necessarily breed them. This becomes really, really helpful later in the game when you first catch a new bee type, but you want to jump up in terms of your production and toughness and lifespan. And as you go up the ore or alloy ladder, you're going to get more and more bonuses to stats. For example, I'm typically using Durasteel frames because they're pretty easy to create. And notice this gives 2.2 to production and 2.5 to drone toughness, whereas the copper frame is 0.5 production and 0.5 drone toughness. So I'm a big fan of Durasteel because they're very easy to make. But you can also make things like tech frames, where the queens will live longer and breed faster, or universal frames, where bees can thrive on any biome. So, speaking of universal frames and bees thriving on any biome, what does that really even mean? Well, like I placed in here, we've got honey queens and honey drones, and notice that honey queen subtype honey, honey drone subtype honey. Different bees can have different main types, right? This is a leafcutter queen, and its subtype is leafcutter. But this is a leafcutter drone, and its subtype is meanderer. So different types of bees have different preferences and different sensitivities to different biomes. And this is something that is actually listed on the wiki. There is a link in the description that you can check out for that. But it shows all of the biomes that each bee can be found in, and if you're looking for biome sensitivities, that is in the Google Doc that I generated, which is also linked in the description. So that's... oh, and there are a bunch of different types and subtypes. But like here, we've got 2 leaf cutters with different subtypes. The subtype typically affects its stats, as you can see here. The meanderer has the same production, but 10 more drone toughness, but it loses a breed rate. It also has a lower lifespan, it has a higher mutation chance, and it does not work day and night. So different subtypes are going to function very similarly, but they might have different stats, or there might be 1 or 2 of the output products that are different between subtypes. So that's something to keep in mind. I've linked on the wiki. It does include most of the differences in subtypes. If you look in my Google Doc, it's a little bit more complete because it does include the changes in production rates. That's another thing that's very common, is that some subtypes will create more or less of a particular item, even though they produce the same item. So different bees and different subtypes will thrive on different biomes. I'm on a lush planet right now because I kind of wanted to just showcase all of the bees here, not these ones, but these bees over on the right-hand side of my inventory are bees that I caught on this planet in just a couple of minutes. I got some honey drones, some bumblebee drones, some orchid drones. I got an orchid queen, a leafcutter queen, and a honey queen. And you can see here my bees are going again because it is daytime. But different bees will thrive on different biomes and with different plants near them. And this is actually something that I'm still investigating myself. Bees have preferences for plants that are nearby. For example, one that I'm sure of, I've checked the documentation for it, bumblebees, it's either bumblebees or honeybees, I guess I don't remember off the top of my head, but one of the very basic bees have a preference for the bee flower. Surprise, surprise. So if you plant bee flowers near your apiaries, it's going to give you a 50% production bonus to the bees in that apiary. There are no plants that bees dislike. However, bees can also have rivalries. So I've listed those rivalries in my Google Doc, which is linked below. And the rivalries will cause one bee type to essentially attack another bee type and actually kill off the drones in the other apiary if they're too close together. I am unsure of the actual distance they need to be away, but I would just, if you notice something weird is going on, double check that your bees are not actually rivals. What else can we talk about? Oh, yeah, let's talk about bee products. So bees, when they're set up correctly, they're going to output items in the apiary like this. So honeybees make honey, of course, and they're also going to give you a little bit of dirt, honeycombs, beeswax, bee silk, and then you're going to get these young queens. And a question that comes up a lot is, what do you do with these little worm young queens? Well, these you go and identify in your microscope, and they're going to look just like a queen, a regular queen, when those are identified in terms of the way their stats are laid out. So if we look at this queen, notice this queen is the 4 core stats. The top 4 are 1, 10, 5, 1. This bee is 1, 12, 4, 1. So it gained 2 drone toughness, but it lost a drone breed rate. And that's because queens are going to, as they breed, they're going to mutate randomly. And you might get better bees, you might get worse bees. So the idea here is over many generations of bees, you're going to be able to selectively breed. So let's say I really want drone toughness right now. I would say, well, this is probably a good contender to start breeding for my 2nd generation. So what I would do is I would take my queen out and put my young queen in, and it's going to start creating its own drones. The old drones will die out. The new queen is now making its own drones that have identical stats. So this way, this is like my 2nd generation of honeybees. I've gained 2 drone toughness and I've lost a drone breed rate. And as you progress, personally, I believe that base production is typically the most important stat. So whenever I get something that has more base production, I'm going to be breeding that one. I have a pretty significant bee breeding facility elsewhere, but just to showcase the basics, I've got this here. So there are 2 types of apiaries. Eventually, you're going to want to upgrade from the regular apiary because it is pretty small. So your upgrade there becomes the large apiary. And if we compare, the regular apiary has an input for a queen, an input for a drone, and an input for a frame. The large apiary has an input for a queen, 2 inputs for drones, and 2 inputs for frames, which means you can now mix and match frames, or you can double up on frames for additional stat bonuses. Now it's nighttime again, so our bees stop producing. So generally speaking, the large apiaries are the one you're going to want to be getting as soon as you can. They do require some bee products. It's if we look again, it requires golden wood and beeswax, both of which you get from bees. And you'll see, my honey queen, my honey drones, honey queens are making beeswax already, so that's part of the way there. Oh, another thing about breeding that is kind of interesting. A queen will only breed with a dissimilar drone once, but you can force this. You can force queens to breed with different drones if you continue to input those different drones and take out the drones she's producing. So why would you want to do this? It's a little bit harder to show this because I don't have the items on me. But if I wanted to, we might actually be able to do this now that I think about it. If we wanted to, so this leaf cutter I just caught, brand new in the wild, and I want to start creating bees. But let's say I'm really far in the game, and these stats look pretty bad. Well, I could take some other bees that I've been working with, like these red-banded drones. So let's take, let's take 100. So this is 3, 13, 2, 1 for the core stats. This is 8, 16, 4, 6. So much, much better production. If I do this, you can see that these drones are decreasing. Oh, I don't have frames in. I think I'm going to need to put some frames in here. A frame here and a frame here. Is this? There we go. So it created some drones now. That means we know that we are actually, our queen is actually producing, but we want to keep those drones out so that we force the queen to specifically be breeding with the red-banded drone. And the red-banded drone is not by default going to want to breed with the queen, but we can force it this way. And if we continue to do this, I'm hoping we can do it in this stack. In fact, I'll do this. If we continue to do this, eventually what's going to happen is we're going to get a young queen, and it's going to be a leaf cutter. But because it's being bred with these red-banded drones, we're actually going to start seeing some benefits from both. You can already see that I'm making some products that, they're obviously not the same color as the leaf cutter. These are actually products that the red-banded drone makes, and because we're forcing the leaf cutter to breed with them, we are getting some of those red-banded drone products. So this is always the thing I dislike about making these kind of live tutorials, is if I'm trying to showcase something, it never wants to happen while I'm actually recording the tutorial. But basically, this is going to be a way to kickstart your bee family tree, if you want to think of it that way. Because these red-banded drones have pretty high stats, the young queens that are going to be generated are going to have some significantly higher stats than the leafcutter queen would get normally. So you'd want to do this later in the game when you have very high-level queens, and or rather, you have very high-level drones, or you have some bee types that you've spent a lot of time working with, and you find a new one, and you want to kickstart that bee's genome, essentially, that bee's stats. Gosh, we're really not getting there, are we? If we look back here, one thing that I have found, a little tidbit of information, when the young queens stack, that means that those queens are going to have identical stats. So I don't know what they are because I can't see them, but I already know by looking at them that these two young honey queens are going to have different stats. There are going to be 3 here that have identical stats and 1 here that is different. Still nothing, huh? Well, let's... let's wait, because I do think this is an important part of production. In the meantime, I will say that the wiki that I've linked below is a huge repository of information, not just about bees, but about everything included in Frackin Universe. And the Google Doc link that I've shared is not nearly as complete. It's just something that I've started working on very recently, but I hope to continue working on that. And right now, the document is just about bees. I may start making some other documents for other aspects of the game, but right now it is just bees. So there is some information about all of the bee products for every bee type and subtype. There is some information on biome sensitivities, so where bees will or will not continue to produce resources, or even preferred biomes where bees will get a 50% bonus to their production. There is some information on rivalries, and I am working on getting the information for flower preferences. So there we go. We've got a young leafcutter queen finally. So we can take these out and we can let the regular leafcutters go. So if I identify this, hopefully this is going to have much, much higher stats than the regular leafcutter queen did, right? This is jump starting my genetic code in a sense. So 4, 14, 3, 4. And if we compare, we've got 3, 13, 2, 1. So pretty nice there. Additionally, the queen lifespan is 450, and our new one is 483. Our mite resistance is 3, and our new one has a mite resistance of 4.37. So this is some pretty significant increases. And what I can do now is I can have this young leafcutter put in here, and that will kickstart. You know, now my second generation of leafcutters are going to have higher stats again. So this is kind of where it starts getting advanced into bees, and I will probably be recording another video showcasing some more advanced stuff about bees. But I think this is hopefully a pretty good primer for you to figure out exactly what you can do with bees and how to do it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments down below. I really enjoy Frackin Universe, and if I can get anyone to get into the mod, or start enjoying some of the systems the mod has to offer, I am all for it. Thanks so much for watching.